We all need to learn something extremely important from the Gabby Petito tragedy. We need to all please take some time, a few minutes at least, to just research the signs of abuse, the signs of domestic abuse, the signs of narcissistic abuse in particular, the signs of mental, emotional, and verbal abuse, because we all kind of understand what bruises are and hitting. We get that, but we don't understand these other signs, and that these other signs could point to worse harm happening. We need to learn and memorize the signs of what abusers do, but also the signs of what someone who is a victim of abuse does. First off, there are a lot of resources on the internet and on YouTube about narcissistic abuse. A good YouTube channel example is Lisa A. Romano. You can just search the word narcissistic abuse. You can search gaslighting. You can search mental and emotional abuse. All of that, you will get a lot of helpful information. I am not a professional psychologist or therapist or anything like that, but I am a survivor of narcissistic abuse, so I will be speaking on behalf of my experiences, and just the fact that when I see Gabby in the police footage, I see my past self, like straight up. I just see myself, and it's been pretty triggering. And I'm also a recovering codependent, so here's what I have to say. In my experience, they do not teach about abuse in school. They do not teach about abusive relationships, especially not about emotional, verbal, and mental abuse. A relationship can be completely toxic and abusive, and the victim's own family members and friends and loved ones could just not even know. One reason is that the victim does a lot to explain away their partner's behavior, or even just not tell anyone what's going on, not tell their loved ones, not tell their friends, not talk about it. Abusers will achieve this through gaslighting, through intimidation, through controlling their victim's communication, reading through all their texts, controlling the texts that are sent out. They will sometimes even make the victim retract their statements when they tell someone what goes on and say, oh no, that didn't actually happen, and send out a message that they approve of, changing the story. They will also just try to isolate you from anyone who isn't them and restrict you from having friendships, especially, and also relationships, even with your family, and just from talking to anyone. And that also helps them know that what's going on is not told to anyone outside of the relationship. If you don't understand gaslighting, please do some research on it. But gaslighting, in a nutshell, is making the victim doubt their own sanity and perception of reality. They mainly do this by saying that things that literally did happen did not happen. Denying that things happened and telling the victim, oh, that didn't happen. Oh, you're crazy. You're remembering it wrong. You need to go to the psych ward, stuff like that. They might even say things like stop playing victim to the victim when they speak out against something that's happening, or convince them that they just enjoy feeling sorry for themselves and they just like telling a sob story. Sometimes the gaslighting is so advanced that the victim literally does not have any ability to perceive or believe that they are being abused or even mistreated in any way. And that is like the ultimate goal for the narcissist or the abuser, to get to that, because obviously if the victim doesn't even think they're being abused, they're never going to talk about it, and talking about it to outsiders is their worst enemy, because that's the enemy of it continuing to happen. Another reason that the victim's family members in particular might not notice any red flags or notice that anything's wrong or out of the ordinary is often because if it's a parent, one or both of the parents might also be abusive toward the victim. I mean, if you really think about it, a healthy person who was not abused, if they get into a relationship, they are able to notice red flags and notice, hey, I'm being mistreated, hey, this isn't normal. But if you've been raised with it in some way, whether it's a parent, a relative, a step-parent, whoever it might be, if you're used to being mistreated in this way, you think it's normal. And if a parent is doing it, they're obviously going to see the person's partner and they're not going to see anything wrong. They're probably going to bond with them and feel like, oh, they're kind of like me, and perhaps even approve of the partner. I'm not saying this is the case in Gabby's case. I'm just saying that this is more often than not how it is. On the other hand, if the family member or parent is not an abuser themselves, they might have been such a victim of abuse at some point in their life that they don't recognize and realize mistreatment and red flags when they see it, because again, they just think it's so normal. They see nothing out of the ordinary here. The victim of abuse will also have a strong habit of taking the blame for everything that goes wrong in the relationship, including the other person's behavior. Part of this, of course, is to do with gaslighting, and we saw Gabby doing that a lot in the police body cam footage. It is absolutely shocking and appalling to me that it isn't extremely obvious to everyone who sees this footage and to the cops who responded that Gabby was the victim. I mean, how much more obvious could it be? She was hysterically crying. She was taking the blame for things in a way that doesn't even make sense. And she was saying that she scratched him to get him to calm down, and that was just ignored. There's so much wrong. I'm not going to go too much into it because there's a lot of videos out there already, but there's so much wrong with the way it was handled. All of us who have been in similar situations to Gabby, we just need to see about 4 seconds of the footage to know what's going on. And I would just like to make it so that everyone, including people who have no experience or do not know anyone who have ever experienced this, to also be able to look at it and know what's going on immediately. That's why I'm making this video. In my opinion, if the police were trained better to see the signs of domestic violence and of abuse, or if they had some sort of psychologist or someone accompanying them, a professional responding to the call, then they would not be taking what Gabby was saying about her OCD seriously, because that doesn't even make sense as an explanation. They would instead read into the signs like her extreme distress, her self-blame, and his behavior, his charisma, his being super uber nice, laughing, and just completely being different. They would not fall for his charisma. They would see that his charisma itself is a sign. It's also very important that we stop going with this whole, oh, women are crazy, women are emotional, you just need to give her some space narrative. We need to stop invalidating and dismissing women so much. So before I read signs off of the internet of narcissistic abuse, domestic abuse, and all of that, I just want to go over some of the signs from my own experience. I was in a very controlling, emotionally, verbally, and mentally abusive relationship for 3 years that thankfully never was physical against me, but it was physical in the way of throwing things and smacking things. And I do believe it's very possible if I stayed longer, it could have become physical against me. And there are a lot of stories out there where relationships go like this for a long time, and then just one day the person snaps and they become physical, and maybe they were never physical before. It can just happen like that, even if it's not happening currently, and that's why these signs are also so important. I took notes just because this isn't easy for me, but these are some of the signs that when I think, okay, what was I doing that could have possibly alerted someone that I was in an abusive relationship, just looking at me. So I thought of when their partner calls, they always go in another room or go outside. The calls are frequent and they freak out if they can't answer the call right away. They drop whatever is going on for the call, even if it's in the middle of the night. They say no to every social invite, and they won't take new phone numbers of new people they meet, regardless of gender. They avoid eye contact with people. Having to leave and spend the night at a friend's house because of a fight might not necessarily be a sign. It could just be someone getting space, but if this happens a lot, and if this happens in just a way that feels very off, and they're not explaining why, or they're not going into detail about what's happening, then this very well could be a sign too. Not telling you what's going on, being reluctant to talk about it, telling things that seem exaggerated or fake about how good of a partner their partner is, or how happy they are together, and crying on the phone or talking to the partner frequently on the phone. You know, there is no like, oh yeah, I can just call them back later, they'll understand. Everything's always an emergency. There's anxiety when they call. I'm just trying to think of things and scenarios when I would be with other people that other people could have picked up on. Perhaps another good example, when I was with a friend once, my partner insisted on letting me borrow his car, acting like he was doing a nice favor, but then all of a sudden, after just a few hours, you know, there was 7 missed calls and there was, you need to give me my car back right now. So it was like a control thing to get me to stop hanging out with my friend. And, you know, there's a whole story. If you want to know more about my story, I will link the video about it. If you ever walk by a couple in public or at a family gathering or something and one of the partners is hysterically crying and the other one's talking to them or yelling at them, or one of them's just crying, or one of them's sitting down crying and the other one's standing over them, any kind of scene like that, you know, I've had that happen, and I've had family members walk by as if nothing was wrong, and that should always be seen as a red flag. And don't be afraid to even get the police involved. It's way better to be safe than sorry. Any sudden mood changes when the partner comes in, or when the partner calls, or while the person's on the phone with the partner, just looks of distress and long periods of silence that may seem like they're just getting berated or yelled at, could be a sign. The last one I can really think of right now before I just read signs off the internet from my experience is just acting really weird. If someone comes up to you to introduce themselves and the person acts very strange and very like afraid of the introduction, afraid to be talking to someone, afraid or refusing to, you know, trade contact information or to make any plans to ever hang out, that happened a lot with me. It's not just in a like, oh, I don't really like your vibe, I don't want to like interact with you way. It's a, I'm too scared to interact with you, or put your number in my phone, or be seen with you, or have to report this interaction to my partner. There's like a difference. Saying no to social plans that you know the person would normally say yes to and be excited about. Another thing could also be the person stops doing their hobbies, like they stop creating art if they do art. Also, just so I don't forget to say this at some point later in the video, if you see signs and you need to talk to the person, make sure that you don't do it around their partner at all. Not when they're on the phone with them, not when they're in the same room with them. Get them somewhere to where they don't have to alter what they're saying, and they might still alter what they're saying because of what I explained earlier, but if they're in the presence of the partner, they will especially be altering what they're saying, and you don't want to get those fake answers. Let me just edit that. Not even just when they're not in the same room with them. Make sure they're not in the same building, not in the same zip code if possible. I forgot to add to also talk to them in person. Definitely not over text. Don't do it in any way that can be tracked by the abuser that they can get in trouble for. So of course there are signs of domestic abuse like bruises and injuries and black eyes and whatnot, but a lot of times those are covered. So emotional signs of domestic abuse would be agitation, anxiety, or constant apprehension, changes in sleep habits like sleeping too much or not enough, developing a drug or alcohol problem, being extremely apologetic or meek. This is huge. Gabby, there it is. Loss of interest in daily activities, low self-esteem, seeming fearful, symptoms of depression, talking about or attempting suicide. So there's a lot of lists out there, but I thought this list was good, and that's healthline.com, how to recognize the signs of mental and emotional abuse. Okay, so humiliation, negating, criticizing. These tactics are meant to undermine your self-esteem. The abuse is harsh and unrelenting in matters big and small. Here are some examples. Name calling. They'll blatantly call you stupid, a loser, or words too awful to repeat here. Derogatory pet names. This is just more name calling in a not so subtle disguise. My little knuckle dragger or my chubby pumpkin are not terms of endearment. Character assassination. This usually involves the word always. You're always late, always wrong, always screwing up, disagreeable, and so on. Basically, they say you're not a good person. Yelling. This is huge. Yelling and name calling are something that I experience, so I feel like I want to emphasize those. But yelling, screaming, and swearing are meant to intimidate and make you feel small and inconsequential. It might be accompanied by fist pounding or throwing things or smacking things like a dashboard, throwing things at walls. Patronizing. Aw, sweetie, I know you try, but this is just beyond your understanding. Or kind of undermining your intelligence. Oh, you don't have common sense. Oh, I have to give you really super direct instructions, don't I? Public embarrassment. They pick fights, expose your secrets, or make fun of your shortcomings in public, or, making a scene. Dismissiveness. You tell them about something that's important to you and they say it's nothing. Body language like eye rolling, smirking, head shaking, and sighing help convey the same message. Quote, joking. The jokes might have a grain of truth to them or be a complete fabrication. Either way, they make you look foolish. Sarcasm, often just a dig in disguise. When you object, they claim to have been teasing and tell you to stop taking everything so seriously. Insults of your appearance. They tell you just before you go out that your hair is ugly or that your outfit is clownish or, why are you wearing that kind of makeup? What are you wearing makeup for? Things like that. What are you wearing that for? Belittling your accomplishments. Your abuser might tell you that your achievements mean nothing, or they may even claim responsibility for your success. I mean, we saw the fiance doing that to Gabby, saying, oh, her little blog, her little website, and then her saying that he doesn't believe that she can do it. You might not think that that's a sign of abuse or murder, but, that's why it's important to see these signs. Put downs of your interests. They might tell you that your hobby is a childish waste of time or you're out of your league when you play sports. Really, it's that they'd rather you not participate in activities without them. Pushing your buttons. Once your abuser knows about something that annoys you, they'll bring it up or do it every chance they get. So control and shame. Trying to make you feel ashamed for your inadequacies is just another path to power. Tools of shame and control include threats, telling you they'll take the kids and disappear, or saying there's no telling what I might do. It could also be threats that they're going to kill themselves if you leave them or if you do something, or threats of them breaking up with you or fake breaking up with you and then making up with you. Monitoring your whereabouts. They want to know where you are all the time and insist that you respond to calls or texts immediately. They might show up just to see if you are where you're supposed to be. I know with me, I had to answer surprise FaceTime calls and then show everywhere that around me to prove that I wasn't with a guy. I would have to send photos of who I was with, and it was embarrassing because I'd have to take them discreetly because I knew it wouldn't be normal to do that, and send him photos to prove that I wasn't with a guy, show him under my bed in the dorm room to show that there wasn't a guy hiding in there. He told me that he had friends who were going to the same campus who would watch me and who would flirt with me to see if I would take the bait. So I was always scared of being watched or monitored. Digital spying, they might check your internet history, emails, texts, call log. They might even demand your passwords. There's also contact lists, DMs, social media. I know that it was kind of a ritual in my case. It would just be like, give me your phone, and then he'd have it for an hour or more, or my laptop, or who knows how long, just any time. I know one time I got a message from an old high school guy that just said hi, and I deleted it, and I was in trouble for that. And I do want to say, I think it's normal and healthy to have some level of jealousy and just say, hey, here are my boundaries, or, hey, I don't really appreciate you talking to your ex in that manner, or, things like that. But what we're talking about here is like getting in trouble for posting happy birthday publicly to someone of the opposite gender. Unilateral decision making, they might close a joint bank account, cancel your doctor's appointment, or speak with your boss without asking. Financial control, they might keep bank accounts in their name only and make you ask for money. You might be expected to account for every penny you spend. Lecturing, this one's big for my experience. Belaboring your errors with long monologues to make it clear they think you're beneath them. Direct orders, from get my dinner on the table now to stop taking the pill. Orders are expected to be followed despite your plans to the contrary. Outbursts. You were told to cancel that outing with your friend or put the car in the garage but didn't, so now you have to put up with a red-faced tirade about how uncooperative you are. And outbursts could be about anything and they could be about nothing. Like literally nothing could trigger them and they could just happen. Treating you like a child, they tell you what to wear, what and how much to eat, or which friends you can see. Feigned helplessness, they may say they don't know how to do something. Sometimes it's easier to do it yourself than to explain it. They know this and take advantage of it. Unpredictability, they'll explode with rage out of nowhere, suddenly shower with you affection, or become dark and moody at the drop of a hat to keep you walking on eggshells. I also want to say that I should flash a picture on the screen of like the 4 cycles of abuse. There's like the building tension, the conflict, I don't know, I'll put it up there, but there's a lot of repeated apologies without changed behavior, and that's huge. An apology without changed behavior is just manipulation. And also promises of changing or not doing whatever it is anymore that just are not honored whatsoever. I know in my case, when I would get fed up with these apologies that never had anything backing them up, he would just, cry and say, you just don't believe in me. You just don't believe I can change. You're giving up on me. And then, make me feel bad for him. That's another thing to watch out for too. A lot of narcissists, they lack empathy and they lack just any healthy way of having emotions. So a lot of them actually know how to cry on command or fake cry. So definitely watch out for if they hold their eyes open for a long period of time and focus really hard and then start crying, they're probably forcing themselves to cry and using it as manipulation. If they walk out in a social situation, stomping out of the room leaves you holding the bag at home. It's a tool to keep the problem unresolved. And this is not the same thing as, hey, we're both upset right now. I'm upset. I need some space. I'm going to go take away. Like that's a healthy, way of communicating and doing that, because space is a legit thing that you need in relationships sometimes to not just keep things escalating, and it's just a healthy thing to do. But this is different. This is like storming out and making a scene and storming out at just weird times, like in order to manipulate some way. Now, if I had $1 for every time I heard this one from my family, using others, abusers may tell you that everybody thinks you're crazy, or they all say you're wrong, or they all say you've lost your mind, you've really gone and done it this time, you need to go to a psychiatrist, you're crazy. And they'll usually say this after you speak up about something that happened, especially if you're doing so publicly. Accusing, blaming, and denial. The behavior comes from an abuser's insecurities. They want to create a hierarchy in which they're at the top and you're at the bottom. I just want to say, having insecurities doesn't make you an abuser if you don't take those insecurities out on people and if you're doing honest work to overcome them. And not everyone's perfect. And I do want to say sometimes, even in healthy relationships, we can do things that are toxic. But if you have the ability to say, oh, I recognize I did something toxic and I'm going to change and improve, then you're not an abuser. We really, really fail in society to teach about healthy relationships. And there's so much dysfunction in family is so common. Jealousy, they accuse you of flirting or cheating on them. And again, this is extreme jealousy, baseless accusations. It's not, hey, I want to talk to you about something that made me feel jealous. Let's, come to a conclusion about this. It's just out of the blue, random made up stories of you going and cheating on them, or, you say you're doing your homework and they say, oh, you're just saying that, you're actually cheating on me right now. I even had a partner in 8th grade who was pretty dysfunctional and messed up tell me that he knows that I have a Asian boyfriend outside of him that I'm cheating on him with, and it was just completely made up. There was no Asian anyone involved. So sometimes it can just really be that made up. And then sometimes it can be things like they'll see a picture of you at an event and they'll zoom in on a guy in the background and say, oh, you sucking his dick tonight? Like, are you cheating with him? Turning the tables. They say you caused their rage and control issues by being such a pain. Another thing to watch out for is them blaming all of their insecurity, control, rage issues on their past partners, or on the fact that they've been cheated on in the past, or something to do with their past. And that is not cool, because your past is never an excuse to mistreat someone in the present. Denying something that you know is true. An abuser will deny that an argument or even an agreement took place. This is called gaslighting. It's meant to make you question your own memory and sanity. I'm not abusing you. I never said that. All of that. Using guilt. So they might say something like, you owe me this. Look at all I've done for you, in attempt to get their way. There's also doing favors or giving you things not because just out of love or out of generosity, but because of a plan to use it to manipulate you, to use it to control you, to use it against you. Goading, then blaming. Abusers know just how to upset you, but once the trouble starts, it's your fault for creating it. Denying their abuse. When you complain about their attacks, abusers will deny it, seemingly bewildered at the very thought of it. Accusing you of abuse. This is the real mind fuck. They'll say you're the one who has anger and control issues, and, they're the ones at the receiving end of it. Trivializing. When you want to talk about your hurt feelings, they accuse you of overreacting and making mountains out of molehills. I think this is something that all of us can learn to not do, because I think all of us tend to, let people know, like, oh, I think you're overreacting. I think we should all do our best not to invalidate people's feelings and emotions. I think everyone has done that, and we all should learn from that. But saying you have no sense of humor. Abusers make personal jokes about you. If you object, they'll tell you to lighten up. Blaming you for their problems. Whatever's wrong in their life is all your fault. You're not supportive enough, didn't do enough, or stuck your nose where it didn't belong. Destroying and denying. They might crack your cell phone screen or, quote, lose your keys, then deny it. Emotional neglect and isolation. Abusers tend to place their own emotional needs ahead of yours. Many abusers will try to come between you and people who are supportive of you to make you more dependent on them. They do this by demanding respect. No perceived slight will go unpunished, and you're expected to defer to them, but it's a one-way street. Shutting down communication. This is a big one. They'll ignore your attempts at conversation in person, by text, or phone, and also shutting down your communication to other people. Dehumanizing you. They'll look away when you're talking or stare at something else when they speak to you. Keep you from socializing. Whenever you have plans to go out, they come up with a distraction or beg you not to go, or punish you or guilt you if you go. Trying to come between you and your family. They'll tell family members that you don't want to see them, or make excuses why you can't attend family functions. Withholding affection. They won't touch you, not even to hold your hand or pat you on the shoulder. They may refuse sexual relations to punish you or to get you to do something. There's also, of course, forcing you into sexual relations and sexual assault and rape and all of that. And I also want to go back to the family point. They might show up to these family events and act super nice and super getting along with them and nothing's wrong. They're really good at manipulating. I mean, I know that my ex would be on the phone with my mom when we'd have fights, and he'd get her convinced that somehow I was partly at fault, or to feel sorry for him, or to see his perspective, when if he wasn't doing all that manipulating and you just looked at it objectively, it would be very obvious what was going on. tuning you out. They'll wave you off, change the subject, or just plain ignore you when you want to talk about your relationship. Actively working to turn others against you. They'll tell coworkers, friends, and even your family that you're unstable and prone to hysterics. Oh yeah, that's a big one. Calling you needy. When you're really down and out and reach out for support, they'll tell you you're too needy or the world can't stop turning for your little problems. Interrupting. You're on the phone or texting and they get in your face to let you know your attention should be on them. Indifference. They see you hurt or crying and do nothing. Disputing your feelings. Whatever you feel, they'll say you're wrong to feel that way or that's not really what you feel at all. Isn't that a mindfuck? So I said before that I was a recovering codependent. I think I'm pretty recovered at this point. I still have some toxic behaviors that I'm working through and letting go of and stuff, and insecurities that I'm working through. So codependence. A codependent relationship is when everything you do is in reaction to your abuser's behavior, and they need you just as much to boost their own self-esteem. You've forgotten how to be any other way. It's a vicious circle of unhealthy behavior. You might be codependent if you are unhappy in the relationship but fear alternatives. Consistently neglect your own needs for the sake of others. Ditch friends and sideline your family to please your partner. Frequently seek out your partner's approval. This is a big one. I still have trouble with this. Critique yourself through your abuser's eyes, ignoring your own instincts. Make a lot of sacrifices to please the other person, but it's not reciprocated. Would rather live in the current state of chaos than be alone. Bite your tongue and repress your feelings to keep the peace. Feel responsible and take the blame for something they did. Defend your abuser when others point out what's happening. Try to rescue them from themselves. Feel guilty when you stand up for yourself. Still struggle with that. Think you deserve this treatment. Believe that nobody else could ever want to be with you, or that you'll never find anyone as good as them. They might tell you you'll never find anyone as good as them, or that there's no one else you could ever love, scarcity mindset type of thing. Change your behavior in response to guilt. Your abuser says, I can't live without you, so you stay. Yeah, that's used a lot. But also, in my experience, and this might apply to others, but if you're codependent, you might also be really sure about wanting to break up and wanting to leave, but then when you actually do it or attempt to do it, you get a sudden panic of you not wanting to lose the person, and it's really just like the fear of being alone and just because you're codependent. And then so I think a lot of times there could be a lot of almost breakups or breakup attempts before final breakup, and that was the case with me. What to do? If you're being mentally and emotionally abused, trust your instincts. Know that it isn't right and you don't have to live this way. Pay attention to those gut feelings. If you fear immediate physical violence, call 911 or your local emergency services. If you aren't in immediate danger and you need to talk or find some place to go, call the National Domestic Abuse Hotline at 800-799-7233. This 24/7 hotline can put you in touch with service providers and shelters across the United States. Otherwise, your choices come down to specifics of your situation. Here's what you can do. Accept that the abuse is not your responsibility. Don't try to reason with your abuser. You can't be rational with people who are incapable of rational thought. You may want to help, but it's unlikely they'll break this pattern of behavior without professional counseling, and that is so important to understand. That's their responsibility. Disengage and set personal boundaries. Decide that you won't respond to abuse or get sucked into arguments. Stick to it. Limit exposure to the abuser as much as you can. Exit the relationship or circumstance. If possible, cut all ties. Make it clear that it's over and don't look back. You might also want to find a therapist who can show you a healthy way to move forward. That's a mistake I made, was not finding a therapist right away after leaving. My life catapulted from there. Give yourself time to heal. Reach out to supportive friends and family members. If you're in school, talk to a teacher or guidance counselor. If you think it will help, find a therapist who can help you in your recovery. It's so frustrating because I went to school counselors just knowing I was dealing with extreme anxiety and panic and just distress that I didn't know where it was coming from. And when I went, I don't believe that they succeeded in recognizing the signs, and they didn't ask me any questions that could have led to discovering that I was in an abusive relationship. I just think our society fails a lot. I mean, when I was going to Colorado State, there was no flyers on the door talking about abusive relationships. I think there should be. I think this should be taught in schools. I think it's so important. The only thing that really helped me get out was my best friend who was studying criminal justice telling me that she was in a class that went over relationship abuse, and she talked to me about it and suggested it to me. And at first I was in denial, so it's not like it just clicked right away. But if it weren't for her intervention and her hanging out with me and helping me get away from him and everything, I could have stayed longer. And she told me this story of her neighbor had been in a relationship just like mine, and one day it just snapped and became violent and a gun was pointed at someone, and that, you know, it was never violent until that time, and that mine could become that way at any minute. And I think that telling people that could be helpful. So I will link a good video by a trusted YouTuber, Kendall Ray, going over the Gabby Petito case if you want to learn more about the case. Please, if you are completely new, don't know anything about abuse, have not been a victim of it, don't know anyone who has, please, I implore you to watch the body cam footage, the whole thing, or as much of it as you can, of the Gabby Petito case, so that you can see that this is very clear signs of this, and it might not be something that you expect is a sign of this, and that's why we need to do better in society and educate people and talk about this. I also beg you to pay attention to your friends and loved ones and family members. Read self-help books about intimacy, about healthy relationships. Be present with people. Please don't be one of those people who something happens and then you're like, oh, well, there was no signs or there was no red flags, because I guarantee you there were, but you have to pay attention. You have to be present. I don't want that last statement to come off as blaming anyone who's ever said like, oh, I didn't see it coming, I didn't know the signs. I understand every situation is complex and everything. I'm just trying to encourage people to just know the signs. That's it. That's all I'm trying to say. This video, this conversation is so important. Please keep having these conversations. If you are not yet vegan, I also encourage you to listen to the TEDx talk, Every Argument Against Veganism, because I do believe if we can get to the very root where we treat all creatures, even chickens and fish, kindly and with compassion, and we don't discriminate against them for looking different or dominate them or feel entitled to abuse animals. You know, a lot of true crime stories start with the person being cruel to animals and abusing animals. If we can start right there at that level, I do believe that people will all be kinder to each other and they won't discriminate against humans if they're not even discriminating against animals. I think veganism is a really good way for more peace on this planet and for more peace between humans. There's also a really good TED Talk by Brene Brown, who is also a really good author, about vulnerability and knowing that you have to be vulnerable to have difficult conversations with loved ones, to talk about what they're going through and to make them feel comfortable telling you what they're going through. Because if we just all did that, that would also do a lot of work to help prevent these, oh, I didn't see it coming types of situations. Thank you so much for listening to this whole thing and doing the research and doing your part in society to help prevent tragedies like this. Rest in peace, Gabby. What a shame, what a terrible thing.